Birth can be one of the most validating, satisfying, memorable experiences in a woman's life. Birth is so personal. Where you choose to give birth is an extremely personal decision, and no decision is wrong. If you are considering giving birth at home, yes, in your home, I'm going to tell you about how I prepared for my home birth that I had in 2023 after a traumatic C-section. Everything from emotionally, spiritually, financially, physically, preparing my space. I'm going to walk you through every step that I took to prepare for this home birth. Now, these steps and these categories that I'm sharing, these are not things that I did step by step. They're more foundationally. So it was kind of like the most important things are going to come first, and then second, third, fourth, and so on. But there are all these steps and all of these practices or habits that I instilled to prepare for my birth were things that I continually revisited. They kind of stacked as I went along through my pregnancy. So obviously, if any of these are helpful for you and you want to take them and reorder them any way that you would like, eliminate some, add some, please do that. First thing that I did was prepare spiritually. Now, my relationship with God is the most important thing, and I was very shook, very traumatized from my first birth, and it was pretty much a faith crisis for me. Not in the sense that I was doubting that God was real or that He was for me, but I felt very lost, and I felt very confused as to why my first birth went the way that it did. So even before I got pregnant for a second time, I took a lot of time to delve in with the Lord and do a lot of practical research as well to really get my mind right and kind of put the first birth out of my mind and kind of resolve it, if you will, and have closure with that birth. And then as I did that, before my second pregnancy, I really sought the Lord about, what do you want from me? What do you have for me? Is this going to be something that you want from me? Which path should I go down? Where should I give birth? Who should I give birth with? Which provider should I go through? Things like that, that I was constantly praying God, seeking God, journaling Him, asking Him for guidance and wisdom and understanding. And I'm not going to say He told me exactly what to do, like go to this provider or that provider or this path or that path, this environment, but it was something that I had an open heart to Him for. And I did hear from Him throughout my second pregnancy that this pregnancy was going to be different, that it was not going to be like my first pregnancy, and that I didn't need to be afraid. And He absolutely delivered on that. The second area of my preparation for my home birth was relationally, the people in my life. Now, home birth and birth in general is extremely mental. It's so much of a mind game. And now, for me, being a person of faith, being a Christian, my foundation of who I am comes from Christ, and that's why for me, I needed to prepare spiritually first. And there are a couple ways I did that, that also kind of seep into relationally, but kind of the next practical step was getting everybody who's important to me on board. And really, the most important person when it comes to birth is my husband. And obviously, my most important person in every area of my life that's walking the earth is my husband. So I really needed to sit down with him and talk through with him what my options were and what was best, and help him be on board, because the last thing that I wanted was for him to not understand, and for us to not to be united on this decision and this approach that we were taking, because I knew that, of course, at home, we're not going to have typical nurses and kind of this facility to support us. This is our home that we're in control of. We have dominion and authority over this home, so I needed him to be on board as well. And also, I know that where the Lord where there's unity, the Lord commands a blessing, and I wanted us to be united on this front and every front. So what that meant was, like, getting my husband on board was, explaining to him really why I didn't want to go the route that I went before. And luckily, he was very present throughout my entire pregnancy, and we're very close. We're best friends. He understands why everything bothered me that it did with our first birth, and he felt the same way on his own level of not enjoying that experience, and he wanted something different for me and for us. So that was a blessing and kind of made it easy for him to be on board, because I know a lot of husbands are very confused by home birth. Like, why is it necessary? Why would we do something like that? It's so kind of strange. And I don't blame them, because they're not birthing, and they are even far further removed from like birth world than women are. So it does take a lot of kind of communication skills and really knowing your husband. Now for me, I know my husband is extremely visual. So I did show him a good number of birth videos, like nothing inappropriate, nothing super graphic, just really wanting him to see the environment and how people set up their homes and just the bonding experience that mom, baby, and dad were having. And just so he could visualize it and see that it was possible. Now, and I think that that really helped him, especially when it came to showing him, oh, this is what certain husbands are doing. This is how they're supporting their wives in their home births. Because his big question was, what do I do? Like, where's my place in this? What am I supposed to be responsible for? I don't want to mess anything up. I want to be able to do what it is that that you want me to do. So that was really helpful for kind of preparing him relationally. And of course, we were fortunate enough to have a few friends that had also had home births. So him being able to talk to those husbands about what they did to support their wives was really helpful for him, just on like a mental state of being like, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's done this. I have support if and when I need it. The biggest tip outside of, or biggest step outside of making sure my husband and I were on the same board was being very selective in who I told about having a home birth. If you are considering a home birth, you already know that it's very rare and it's very unusual path. And because I know myself and I have struggled with anxiety in the past, I'm a big people person, and I can be kind of discouraged kind of easily. I didn't want to tell anybody about our choice if I already didn't know that they were going to be supportive. Now, again, we were fortunate enough to have friends that already went through and like birthed through this path. So of course I knew I could talk to them about it. But as far as like other people, I really didn't want to tell. Like when we would see people at church and all that stuff, I wouldn't like willingly give that information. I would say, oh yeah, we're going the midwife route, of course, because there are plenty of midwives that work in hospitals and birthing centers and a lot of different environments. And the good thing is if it's your second birth or third subsequent birth, if you've had older children, a lot of times people don't ask you where you're giving birth because they just kind of assume you're giving birth the same place you did before. And I heard this really cool podcast that was talking about how a woman, when someone would ask her where she's giving birth, she'd just say, oh, close by. And it's not wrong. So that was a fun kind of tip that like encouraged me even more that like, okay, I really don't have to tell people about this. Now, as far as it comes to our parents, I did tell them where we were planning on giving birth, but I did go into it knowing like I don't expect these people to be not these people. I don't expect them to be supportive because it's so strange, but then also having a lot of grace for them, realizing like this is a very unusual path. Like it's very reasonable for people to be curious. Now, my parents, when I told them, my dad was very supportive and very like, oh yeah, like his dad was born at home. Like it wasn't that strange to him when he sat back and thought about it. My mom did have a lot of questions, but that's okay. It's okay to have questions. Like I had questions when I first started going through the process as well. And Tim's parents were very, very supportive, just like, hey, if that's what you want to do, why not? And yeah, so I think that it is, it's important, of course, like to explain to I'm glad that I explained to them, kind of how traumatic my first birth was so they could understand like, okay, you didn't want to go back to that route again. And the importance of sharing kind of why certain decisions are being made. But I was very selective with telling people like outside of family, outside of friends, what I was doing and why, because I didn't want the negativity just even in my ears. Like I didn't even want to hear it. I was very much big on like protecting my mindset, and making sure that my confidence was very high because I already was going into it with kind of a deficit or just having this trauma in my past of just surrounding birth in general. Like I was very selective, had very strong boundaries about it. And that's even why I didn't post on YouTube for a long time, because I was very much like, okay, I talk about motherhood, I talk about birth and things, like how can I get on here and not talk about me planning to have a home birth, but I really didn't know how it was going to go, of course. So I was very, like very big on protecting my mind with that, and that's why I intentionally didn't tell certain people relationally. Now, the other relational piece about preparing for home birth that I took was, of course, finding providers. So I chose a certified nurse midwife as my main provider, and I also hired a doula to support me throughout my pregnancy, and of course, especially during my labor and my birth, and then postpartum, she was supporting me as well. One of the biggest things that made me feel so supported and so seen, and relationally supported and kind of relationally prepare for my home birth was my doula's intake form. Now, she asked a lot of questions. It was super thorough, and I really, really appreciated that because it made me just realize how much she cared. And this is also one of the benefits of that I found of going the midwife route and the home birth route is just the level of care is top tier compared to OBGYNs and having hour-long appointments with the midwife and instead of only seeing the OB for 10 minutes at a time after waiting for 30 minutes and all those different things. So that intake form, she asked me different questions about like what was important to me, what were my spiritual practices, who was going to be supporting my older children? What was my diet like? What challenges was I facing? All these different questions she was asking that made me feel like she really, really cares. And a lot of things, like I had to come back to it several times because I didn't even really know the answers at first. But it just made me really go to a deep dive and be intentional about birth. And again, reflecting on how mental birth is and if there's things that are going to get in the way of me achieving the birth and the experience that I want. Like she was willing to resource me and help me walk through those things and find solutions for them. So the next area of preparation that I used, or the next area that I prepared in for my home birth was mentally. So obviously I talked a bit about this, how of course your relationships or of course, how I talked a little bit about how relationships and spirituality and my faith do affect my mental state, of course. But overall, there are some things that I did to prepare my actual mind for birth. One of those being birth videos. I mentioned that I showed this to my husband, and those helped me, helped him visualize and kind of prepare. But they also helped me a lot too, just because I've over the years, over my life, had heard so much rhetoric and language and media about how painful birth is and how hard it is because y'all, home birth is unmedicated. There's no epidurals. There's no spinal taps. There's no pain medication. So everything is completely medicated or unmedicated. So you're feeling everything. And I know that's one of the main reasons why people don't want to go the home birth route. And one of the reasons why people go to the hospital, not because they love the hospital, not because they love the OBs, but because they want the drugs. And so obviously learning how to manage pain and even like changing my language around that of like increasing my comfort, managing my comfort and not thinking about pain was a big part of my mental preparation. One of the ways that I did that was taking a Christian hypnobirthing course. And I know that that might sound a little spooky, and there's a great research behind it. And I love that I found one that was faith-based because faith is so important to me. And it really was a course that was talking about how to give birth physiologically and how to get your mind right and properly think about birth, think about your body, think about my body. And that was really helpful for me because I didn't do any type of preparation in that way for my first birth. And I think that it totally just increased my confidence, like how I thought about myself, how I thought about my body, especially coming out of a traumatic birth. I had a lot of shame, a lot of guilt about my body, feeling like my body had failed me, feeling like I couldn't birth a baby in a healthy way. I couldn't grow a baby in a healthy way because our first son was premature and he was in the NICU and he had some issues from our birth and all the complications that I had. So that course was very, very helpful. Also, the same woman who makes the Christian hypnobirthing course makes an app with all of these meditations in it. And it's really just scripture being read to you in a very calming voice with a very calming like instrumental in the background. And I would fall asleep to those, take naps to those so that my body and my mind would get used to those and kind of like I don't want to say become my inner dialogue, but it would just become, imprinted in my mind and on my heart, of course, with scripture, but also these affirmations saying like, I am confident, I am made to birth, things like that, because, there's power in the tongue and there's power in words. So that really, really helped me, especially doing it, 3, 6, 5 months before birth and making it a habit. The other thing that mentally prepared me for birth was the midwife guide. Now, this guide was provided to me by my midwife, something that they create and give to all of their patients and moms at the beginning of their care. And this was a game changer to me. When I saw this guide, I was like, this is exactly what I thought I was going to get during my first birth, like working with an OB. I remember being so disappointed when I would go to my appointments, not only like how short they were, but my appointments with the OB were pretty much like, oh, okay, is the baby still, is the baby's heart still beating? Okay, great. Let's check your vitals and we'll see you next week or next month. And that's kind of like, and I asked one of the OBs one time, like, okay, so like I'm pregnant, what am I supposed to do? And she was like, oh, well, just take your prenatals and come to your appointments. And I was like, that's it? Like, shouldn't I be eating special foods? Shouldn't I be like super mindful of my diet? Or like, well, this just feels too casual. Like, this is a big deal, carrying a life, growing a life. And I feel like that's one of the big differences between my two pregnancies was having this guide, this comprehensive guide. It took me from all the way from conception or 6 weeks of care, being 6 weeks pregnant, all the way up to 6 weeks postpartum. So what to eat? They have pictures in here of different type of supplements and like dosages of food and grams and how to track calories and nutrients and exercises to do and rest and all of the things. It was so comprehensive, and I was like, okay, I feel like I know what I'm doing now. I feel like I have options. I feel prepared. I feel like I have a plan. And if you're anything like me, I like having a plan. I like knowing what to do. Okay, if this happens, what should I do? If that happens, what should I do? When I got this guide and read through it, I would reference it often, especially the closer and closer I got to birth. And I felt like this really gave me the peace of mind that I needed. And I had, it was better than Google, y'all, because it was more personalized, and not personalized like to me with my name, but it was more of like, okay, this is something that was created for me from my provider, and I feel like it just exceeded my expectations. I felt like I could take a deep breath knowing that after I was reading this, knowing that I had this and that it was available to me, it was just the biggest blessing. The next category that I prepared, or the next category that I focused on to prepare for my home birth was emotionally. Now, as we already talked about, and I'll probably say it 17 more times today, that birth is so mental. And I already was, again, dealing with anxiety, prenatal anxiety on top of just regular anxiety surrounding birth and surrounding pregnancy, especially at the 35-week mark, which was that was the week where I had went into the hospital with our first son. And approaching that week, I was just a complete mess. Mind you, a week after that, my dad passed away. So it was a lot going on. And I started going to counseling for my mental state 2 weeks before that 35-week mark, and talking to one of my friends who had gone through home birth and who was really rooting for me really helped, and she was just really made me feel so seen. So that's again a reason, that relational preparedness and support was really big for me. So I went to counseling and was really talking through to her, the counselor, about all the fears that I had surrounding this birth, and feeling like, wow, like what if God fails me again? Like I really feel like God failed me with the first birth. And um, just being able to talk through that and being able to she was a Christian counselor, so obviously that was really helpful for me to give like that perspective, like that same world view. But that was a big game changer for me, because I knew that I was going to have some mental blocks going into this birth if I wasn't able to fully, I'm not going to say heal, because I really think that healing is like an ongoing process, but to really be able to have language and process my first birth, she unlocked something for me during that counseling session, and being able to talk through like, okay, I left it all on the table, cried it out, wrote it out, all those things. And that was really, really, it's like a big release for me. And I don't think I would have been able to handle birth. I want to say handle it, but I don't think I would have been able to have the birth that I wanted to have and go through the process that I needed to go through if I had those mental blocks. Journaling is also a big part of emotional preparedness and preparation for me for birth. I journal even now, and I have for years and will continue to, but that was also something that was very helpful for me, being able to write it down on paper or type it out with the Lord. And I two-way journal, so that means I'll like one page I'll write to God like what I'm feeling, what my prayers are, what I'm thinking about, what I'm worried about, and then on the other page I'll write from the perspective of God, kind of writing out what I know His voice to be as His daughter. And it's something that's been a very healing experience for me. I always feel closer to the Lord when I journal in that way. And that was really big for me throughout pregnancy, because I was so in my head. I was so concerned. I was so, walking by faith and feeling like, oh my gosh, like this could go really bad. Not in the sense of like something bad could happen to me or the baby, but just the sense of like, I'm doing something so unconventional. I'm doing something that's so risky. And my faith is already pretty fragile in this area of birth. And God, I'm stepping out on the water again, basically, and trusting you to come through. And He did. So I'm very grateful to have that journaling habit and be able to look back even now on what I was thinking, what I was feeling back then throughout my pregnancy, and of course what the Lord was saying to me too. So the next area of preparation that I was very intentional about with my home birth and preparing for my home birth was physically. Now I know this is probably one of the bigger categories, longer categories, and of course this applies, no matter where you're giving birth, or just whatever birth environment that you're going to be in, because we're all pregnant. We're all pregnant, all growing babies, and obviously everybody has different physical needs. But the biggest thing that I did differently for this birth was to follow the Brewer's diet. The Brewer's diet is a pregnancy diet that was created by a doctor named Tom Brewer, and I found out about it through a Facebook group that I mentioned in a previous video, the VBAC group in my state. One of the recommendations that some of the women had used in order to prevent preeclampsia and high blood pressure in their pregnancies, which is something that I faced in my first pregnancy. So that was a solution that I found. And y'all, Brewer's diet changed the game for me, and I even started it before I got pregnant, and I think that it helped to reduce my blood pressure. Now, I'm not totally sure, but I definitely think it helped. I think it was maybe a myriad of things, but the majority of the diet, the majority of the kind of rules for the diet is to get 100 to 120 grams of protein per day, and to use salt to taste, and to be be unrestricted with how much weight you're trying to gain. But it's really about getting enough protein in, enough vitamin C, enough green leaf was a huge game changer. And I'll put like the list of things on here, all the different ways that you can achieve it. It has different categories and different options and different nutrient goals, and daily nutrient goals that you have to hit every single day. And if you're someone who's like a bird eater like I used to be, it's pretty difficult to achieve. But after a while, first couple of weeks, you get used to it. But I loved it. I felt like I had a sense of control and like a solution for a lot of the problems and complications that I had from my first birth. So it's just a complete game changer, a complete blessing, complete hack. Brewer's diet. Try it. It's really good at producing blood and increasing your blood volume. So a lot of women struggle with anemia because, most of us bleed every month. And a lot of us just don't actually have good nutritional habits either, of like, girl dinner and a piece of cheese here and a Reese's cup there. And it's not really like good, hearty food. So that's one of the beautiful things about pregnancy. I feel like it really forced me to focus on my nutrition. And I did gain 40 pounds with my most recent pregnancy, versus I think I gained like 30 something or very close to 30 with my first son. And a lot of it has to do because of nutrition. And you're supposed to gain weight during pregnancy, of course, because you're growing a human, but also your body just needs way more nutrition. And I think that's one of the things that I did not like about my first pregnancy and the first care of the care that I was under with my first pregnancy, was there's so much emphasis on weight and like don't gain too much weight. But with the midwives, they were very much like, they took my weight twice and that was it throughout the entire pregnancy. And that helped with my mental state, and that gave me kind of the freedom to eat as much as I needed to eat to be healthy and to grow a healthy baby. The second thing that I did to prepare physically for my home birth or my second birth was vitamins. So I took a whole rack of vitamins. I took beef liver, I took magnesium, I took vitamin D. Of course, I took a prenatal, I took vitamin D. I took a handful of vitamins every single day. And I think that that was really, really helpful as well. Learning about different ways that your body absorbs nutrients and vitamins, and whether it's better through topically, through your skin, digesting it. I did try different things like a magnesium lotion, because magnesium helps relax your body and can help reduce blood pressure. I was very blood pressure conscious, of course, during my second pregnancy. I also did the raspberry leaf tea recommendation towards my third trimester. I don't know how much that helped or not. I mean, I had a fast labor, so maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. But I enjoy tea and hot drinks, so that was an easy one for me. The other thing that I did to prepare physically was go to the chiropractor. So my midwife actually includes 2 chiropractor appointments with like her preferred chiropractor, and that was a really, really cool experience. I'd never been to the chiropractor before this pregnancy, and she was Webster certified, so she was like so comprehensive. I was crying in her office talking about all the things that I was going through this pregnancy, and it was really cool. The chiropractor helps to like align your pelvis, because some babies do get stuck if you have like some misalignment. And she was explaining to me, she was like very like gave a really good overview of like kind of how your body works and how your body can change during pregnancy. And it's like can be very preventative, and also if you have back pain or something going on. And of course she asked me about that, if I had any pain or like hip pain, things like that during pregnancy. But it was very like painless. She had me lay on this like special pillow, so I could still lay with my belly down, but it was a pillow that protected my bump and my baby. And it was really cool, and I'm so glad that my midwife included that, because I probably wouldn't have went if it wasn't for that. But there's just so much research out there that says how chiropractic work and science can help you give birth quicker and more comfortably if everything is aligned properly, from your spine to your head, your back, your hips, your feet. And she even showed me how like when I was laying on my belly, how like my legs, like one was a little bit longer than the other, not because it literally longer, but because like I have a little bit of a hip misalignment, so she fixed that for me. And just like feeling a little bit funny afterwards, a little like lightheaded, not in a bad way, so she had me sit down before I drove and went home. But that was a really, really cool experience, and something else I did to prepare my body for birth. Now, I did a lot of kind of small things that you have probably heard of and that are very common to prepare for birth in general, from bouncing on a yoga ball, which that was so fun for me because I didn't get to do that with my first son because I gave birth so early and he was preterm. So bouncing on a yoga ball, doing Epsom salt baths to, again, reduce blood pressure, muscle relaxation, all of those things. I did a lot of spinning baby exercises every week. I would go on their website according to what my gestational period was and like what I should be doing to prepare my body and open my pelvis and to prepare for birth. I did get a prenatal massage, which that was kind of, I feel like, more like an emotional thing, but who knows? It is something that I did that, again, I didn't get to do during my first pregnancy. And like this pregnancy was so redemptive for me in so many ways because I got to do so many things that a lot of first time moms do to like pamper yourself and like have fun and enjoy just like the seat of being pregnant. So that was one thing that I did that like kind of made me sleepy, the massage, but that was so cool to do. I also prepared and made padsicles for myself and put those in the freezer to kind of like, help any soreness that was going to be there after pregnancy. I got a sitz bath. I never ended up using it, which is not good, that my doula gave me, especially because I tore. It would have been very helpful, but I just couldn't bring myself to like sit on the toilet but for that long period of time. Those are the things that I did to prepare my body physically for home birth and for my second birth, my first vaginal birth. So one very important piece of preparing for home birth that I forgot to mention is the financial part. I'm pretty sure that it's a universal price, or at least it was I'm pretty sure every year there's a universal price. I'm not sure how much it fluctuates, but for me, when I had my home birth in 2023, we paid $6,000 out of pocket, and that's all we paid from the beginning, like my very first visit with them at 10 weeks up until 6 weeks postpartum. Everything, all of my visits were included in that price. So I really enjoyed that and appreciated that because it was transparent pricing. Unlike with working with an OBGYN, I had no idea what I was going to be paying after every appointment, even after the birth. I didn't know all the services that I would have been receiving. And we got hit with a bill, I think 6 months after Joshua was born. We got several different bills the first year, which none of them shocked me. It came incrementally, but the shocker was the $4,000 bill we got when I was 34 weeks pregnant with our second son. So we got a bill 2 years after our first son was born from the hospital. That was pretty much double the price that we had previously paid. So total price for our C-section and 10-day hospital stay was over $8,000 out of pocket versus the $6,000 we paid for the home birth. So to me, it was worth it. We saved money in a way, not to say that we'd have the exact same experience, because of course some people do pay next to nothing or only a couple $100s for their hospital births. But for me, I just like the idea of it being transparent and knowing that what I was going to be paying for. And of course, we had to save for that, and our pregnancy was extremely planned. So if you're planning for a home birth and going through private midwifery, you are going to have to pay out of pocket. We did just do monthly installments, which were really helpful, because if you do end up transferring or out of their care, like, you don't get your money back because you're paying for the appointments that you paid for or that you did participate in, even if you don't end up giving birth with them, which I think is fair in a way, because the same thing would happen, God forbid, all the moms who go through miscarriages or stillbirths, things like that. You still are paying for services even though you don't end up giving birth with them the way you planned. So I think that is honestly very fair. I know that's the financial piece is a big thing for a lot of dads or husbands, kind of wondering what that's all about. But I mean, we just don't usually ask as many questions when we go through a system or a process that we feel we trust or that we're familiar with, like going with OBGYNs. So to me, it was totally worth it. Some insurances do reimburse you for home birth. Mine said that they would, but then they made it very, very hard, or not even them, but the providers made it very, very hard for me to go through the process that I needed. And even I had to get verification, and my old OBGYN, they would not verify me, even though it wasn't their money. But they wouldn't just write a letter to my insurance saying yes, she's indeed pregnant. Anyway, I let it go. But I just wanted to be honest and transparent about, our process or what we did. Sorry I forgot to include it when I originally recorded. But this is a really important piece. And my midwife, she does hold Q&A Zoom calls before you become a client, and that's a big part of it is insurances. And a lot of midwives don't want to deal with insurance because it's such a headache. And obviously if you're an adult to really any capacities as any type of medical events in your life, you know what a headache insurance is in general, so how much more to deal with when you're pregnant. So yeah, I think that it's totally worth it though. And I should also say mine was a little bit more expensive because I did go the certified nurse midwife route. I believe regular midwives that are not nurses are a little bit cheaper. I believe it was $4,000 back in 2023 to have a midwife go through midwifery care. But again, it's totally worth it if you think about the care from 12 weeks on to 6 weeks postpartum, including group visits, including office visits, NSTs, all of those things that my CNM did in office. It was totally worth it. The last area of preparation that I focused on for my second birth was my environment. Now, this one probably has the most questions about, preparing for birth, because when you are giving birth at home, of course, you're going the midwife route. And I mentioned, of course, that I chose a certified nurse midwife as my provider, mostly because I had to, because I was having a vaginal birth after cesarean, and in the state that I live in, you cannot have a VBAC without a certified nurse midwife. So that was one of the main reasons, or the main reason why I chose her. And I know that when it comes to preparing for home birth, kind of one of the things that a lot of Christians that are concerned about is like, okay, home birth people seem kind of like crunchy, seem kind of like spiritual, but not in the way that I'm spiritual and like kind of new agey. Like, how did you sift through that, and how did you kind of deal with that or manage that? And I think it's a really good question because, when you are going through home birth, it's a different kind of experience than going the OB route, because like you're paying out of pocket. This is a provider that you're hiring, and it makes it feel more personal, and it is more personal than like in going the OB route where like, your insurance is paying first and then you're paying whatever is left over. And it feels more like transactional when you go the OB route. At least that's how I felt anyway. So when choosing a midwife provider, kind of my mindset was like, I just really want somebody who's going to get the job done. And I had to decide, what was most important to me? Was it most important that I had somebody who aligned with my beliefs, and was a Christian and believed in Jesus and all of that? Or was it most important that I had somebody who was going to help, that I was hiring someone to get a job done, that I was hiring someone to help me get my vaginal birth after cesarean at home, to have my HBAC? And I talked to one of my friends who is a home birth mom as well, about kind of the scenario that I was in, because my midwife, I don't think, I had no problems with her beliefs personally, but I think it's kind of ideal that you want, someone who's a Christian, someone who aligns with your beliefs. But I think that it can be kind of a distraction from what you're actually doing. Because if you think about it like this, like, if you've had a OB before, or you have any type of doctor that you see, or I know for me, like I was not questioning the nurses at the hospital for my first son's birth of like, what are your beliefs? What do you do? Like, you're here to do your job. I trust that you have your certifications and your licenses and whatever else you need to be here. Help me get this baby out. Help me, do whatever we need to do. And I think that sometimes, Christians can be too like Christian-y and like not, it also just, it's kind of just a distraction, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So when choosing a midwife provider, it was really about somebody who was going to help me get this baby out the way that I wanted to get him out, but also someone who's going to honor the environment that I was creating. So, excuse me, I did have some boundaries about who I would work with and who I would not work with. But what was most important was that the person that I chose was going to honor what I wanted. So as I mentioned earlier with my doula, sharing or asking me to fill out this intake form, and me sharing with her what was important to me. I told her that, hey, I'm a Christian. This is what my husband and I believe. This is what's important to us. This is what we want in our birth environment. I want worship music playing. I want it to be a sacred, spiritual environment. I'm going to be praying. My husband's going to be praying over me, like different things like that. And as long as, she's not going to get in the way of that, I think that that's what mattered the most. Of course, there are Christian doulas. I did have a Christian doula for my first birth, and she prayed over us before we went into surgery, and that was really meaningful to me and like very, very special. But that wasn't the main reason why I hired her. It was because she's a Christian. So I think that if you're kind of like going back and forth between that, like, oh, I really want somebody who's Christian and who's saved, I think that if you can have that option, that's incredible. Like, absolutely choose that. Now, would I rather go the OB route than if I couldn't find a Christian home birth midwife? No, like, that's not an option for me, because to me, I'm forsaking both. Like, if I have to go the OB route, like, the OB is not praying over me, and there are probably some out there that do that, and like, or they ask or whatever, and that's beautiful. But I just think, sometimes just remember that I had to remember that, I'm hiring somebody to do a job. Like, when you have a plumber come out to your house, or you go to the mechanic, like, all these things are nice if these people share your faith, but you also never know what the Lord's going to do through your birth experience while you're playing worship music in the background and your husband's praying over you and with you, and like, what type of effect that's going to have on people. So, God can use anyone in anything. So I did have, back to kind of like, the providers are a big part of the environment. Of course, that's why I told that story. But I think the big thing is, having vision for the type of space that I wanted to have. So I did have a Pinterest board of like, the birth space that I wanted, how I wanted it to look with like Christmas lights, twinkle lights, with like low lighting, all of those things. And I shared all of this stuff with my husband, like, this is what I want, because he set everything up. And the birth pool obviously is a big part of the environment. I wanted snacks. I had a birth cart with all of like the supplies that they put in the midwife guide, of like all the things that I needed to have, all the towels, all of those things. I had a playlist that I created several months, probably halfway through my pregnancy, and I would listen to it as I was driving, going to my appointments, around the house every morning. I played worship music with my boys, and when I was pregnant, it was just with our oldest. And I would play it so that like my spirit and my body would get used to like relaxing. Like whenever I heard this music, it was familiar music to me. Honestly, while the music was playing during birth, I don't remember it at all. I remember in the beginning, but not towards the end. Laborland is a very intense place to be. Created a thank you basket for my midwives with some snacks and things that I knew that they liked. I had stalked their Instagram to see like, okay, what kind of snacks did people get them in the past, and like cute little fuzzy socks and stuff. They didn't take any of it because they're so generous, and they're like, oh, we don't need it. And maybe because they weren't there that long. But the midwife basket is really great to have, because I had heard, if you're laboring for 2-3 days, like they get tired and hungry too. They have to leave and come back and things like that. But I ended up eating them later because they left them. Really, the main thing for kind of creating the actual environment in our home that I wanted, a big part of that was, making sure that our oldest son was taken care of as well. So my mom actually took him out of the house, took him over to his other grandparents' house for the day, because like that was going to be a big distraction for me, was him being there. And not everybody feels that way about their kids. You just got to know your kid and know yourself. So that was a big part of protecting the environment as well. The clothes that I wanted to wear, I knew that I wanted to wear a nursing bra because they're super comfortable. My favorite nursing bra, still love sleeping in them at night. Yeah, just making sure that was available. The environment that we chose was right outside of our bedroom. So like my shower was close by, there was a toilet close by. Everything was like within a 10-foot radius of where I was going to be birthing and laboring. And the main thing was that my husband was in charge of everything. Like he was the one communicating with my doula and the midwives. He was the one who knew where everything was supposed to go, and where everything was. And that's also another beautiful thing about being home, is it's your house. You know where everything is. And obviously, my husband knows where everything is too. So I would walk him through things. I went through the guide with him. I highlighted parts that were like specifically like important for him to know. And that was just super. He was just, my right hand man, so that I didn't have to answer any questions while I was laboring and birthing. It was completely amazing. Home birth can be so empowering, and I'm so grateful that I got to have a home birth after cesarean. Even over a year later, I'm still amazed that the Lord gave me this experience, and I honestly don't think I'll be over it ever. I hope I never am. If you're interested in learning more about home birth, check out some other videos in this series, especially my home birth after cesarean home birth story that is going to be right here popping up for you. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.